Hello everyone, I'll recommend a new coming movie. Today, the movie's topic is about the Mariana Trench, the 2020 American science fiction action horror film, Underwater. We have the ability to explore space, but we know little about the Mariana Trench. It's not only the deepest ocean known but also the closest place on Earth to the mantle. Because of the complex topography and harsh conditions of the trench, it has hindered various exploration activities. Though the limit depth of human exploration for Mariana Trench is only 11 kilometers, it's deep enough to fit into the entire Everest. This depth brings about a very dark, very low temperature and oxygen content environment. The water pressure is up to 1000 atmospheric pressure. Under such tremendous pressure, the unprotected humans will instantly be squeezed into foam. But this place that seems to be a restricted area is not as calm as it seems on the surface. The Trench exploration robot was once at a depth of 100,000 meters, taking pictures of deep-sea creatures. There are studies that show the scientists have been looking for giant squid lives here. Are there any other species on the mysterious seabed? We still don't know. The story we're going to tell today takes place in a parallel spacetime. The base of technology here has been built at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, a huge drilling station. The main character of the movie is a big hit in Twilight Saga. Norah was a mechanical engineer at the Kepler workstation. The depressing environment and months of monotonous work made her so bored that she could talk to spiders. But at this time, an earthquake came out of the blue. The structure collapsed due to severe vibration, and a large amount of seawater began to pour in. In a hurry, she and two of her colleagues, Rodrigo and Paul, ran into the isolation bin. The people who couldn't make it in time were all locked out of the cabin. They wanted to use the radio to ask for help, but no one answered at all. The three of them had to climb towards the location of the escape pod bay. When they finally found it, Norah discovered that the escape pod bay had been released. The rest of the employees who couldn't get into the cabin lately were gathered in the control room waiting for help. What made it worse was that the whole Kepler station had been destroyed by nuclear. Nuclear reactors were also collapsing, and they would explode in 30 minutes. They had to get out of the hatch to survive, going down the seabed to Roebuck station a kilometer away. A kilometer distance might not be a lot on land, and it seemed that it could be done easily, but it was hard to get on a dark ocean. Even if there were transit stations along the way to rest, they also took the risk of huge water pressure and disorientation. Just as everyone was in a state of uncertainty, the violent vibration came again. The workstation seemed to be breaking down. They could only start to change the diving gear right away. In the case of insufficient equipment, Rodrigo left the qualified equipment to others and quickly put on a cracked helmet. This led to the hard extrusion of his helmet under huge water pressure. His whole body also turned into a heap of debris the moment the hatch door was opened. In this extreme environment, human power was so small, but they couldn't panic. Because there was still a distance from here to the bottom of the sea, they had to take a lift. But the lift was stopped by a broken escape pod on the descending route. Just as they were about to clear the obstacles, suddenly, a strange creature came out of it. This creature was obviously not any known species. Just then, the lift suddenly lost power. On the top of the warehouse came a strange knock. It seemed that there was something that was constantly hitting. Then there was a violent explosion at the Kepler station. The lift also fell rapidly. The survivors got out of it to avoid falling objects. They tried to identify the direction, but also avoided debris. Just before they fled to the transit station, a vague humanoid swayed over them. Fortunately, the transit station was still working and they could walk down the passage to another exit. But the outside knock was still reverberating. It seemed that the haunted monster was following outside. When they were walking through a collapsed building, the last person was also dragged away by the monster. But they could only move on under the urgent circumstance. The workstation and oxygen consumption that would collapse at any time also made him go to the bottom of the sea again. At the risk of being found by the monster, they continued their way to the Roebuck workstation. The dark sea was a kind of inexplicable pressure. This pressure came not only from the huge water pressure but also from the monster that haunted them. But just then, one of them was suddenly dragged away by the monster. The captain wanted to save him, but he was caught. This strange man came from the deep sea. Fortunately, the captain caught the obstacles in time and was saved. When Norah went to save him, she saw the monster again. It still did not leave but tried to capture them. The monster pulled them fast up the water. Under the pressure changing, their suits began to collapse. To save Norah, the captain cut off the rope and an explosion broke out on the seafloor. Once again, Norah, who fell to the bottom of the sea, lost her way, though she was picked up by the tyrant squid she met on the way. In the dull light, she luckily found a transit station. But the facilities were old and there was no escape cabin. If she stayed here, there was only one way to die. The instinct of survival allowed Norah to start looking for all the equipment available and go to the Roebuck workstation again. Not far away, Norah found two lost teammates. One of them was seriously injured and could only be dragged forward. When they were about to reach the Roebuck station, Norah unexpectedly discovered many monsters in front of them. These monsters seemed to be sleeping and not attacking, so they could only go to the entrance with quiet and careful moves. Just as they got through the monster's nest, the alarm of oxygen shortage suddenly rang, waking up the monsters. The other two broke through the monster's siege, but Norah was caught by the monster. Norah, who had been swallowed, used a signal bomb to hit the monster from inside. But it didn't work. More monsters were waking up. A pair of green beans' eyes flashing blue light, looking for infiltration. What was crazier was way behind. A huge monster suddenly appeared. It had the shape of Cthulhu, the touch of Cthulhu and the power of Cthulhu. It was the legendary Cthulhu. These monsters were just parasites on Cthulhu. Under the huge size of the Cthulhu, the transfer station in Roebuck was severely damaged in a moment. Norah and her teammates had fled to the workstation. This place wasn't like Kepler's workstation, but as long as they found the escape pod, they could be saved. Just as the entire workstation started to crumble, they found the escape pod. But it was a pity that one of the 3 remaining escape cabins was broken. Under the strong demand of Norah, the other 2 people floated smoothly towards the surface. Norah could only sit in the control room, looking at the beast and bearing its roar. Then she quietly launched the nuclear reactor meltdown procedure. Cthulhu was drowned by a violent explosion. Norah seemed to be immortal at this point. I think the overall visual effect of this latest monster movie in 2020 is still good. Unknown creatures and dark environments always work for deep-sea phobia. The atmosphere and the climax of the movie are also spectacular. But the whole movie spends most of its time on the escape. There are no thrilling fights for the audience. The ending of the movie is easy to guess. There is no spiritual sublimation. I only see the selfishness of human beings and the lack of awe for everything. This movie is not enough to appeal the audience.